U.S. tonight is ordering a squadron of a dozen stealth fighter jets to the Caribbean to conduct operations against drug cartels. Of course, this all comes as Venezuela sends a message to the Trump administration, too. Lucas Tomlinson is at the White House tonight for us. Good evening to you, Lucas.
Good evening, Aisha. The White House has approved the deployment of 10 F-35 stealth fighter jets to Puerto Rico after a pair of Venezuelan F-16 jets buzzed an American-guided missile destroyer in the Caribbean. President Trump sent the following warning to Venezuela moments ago.
If they do put us in a dangerous position, they'll be shut down.
The Pentagon called the flyover of armed Venezuelan F-16s over the USS Jason Dunham highly provocative. The flyover took place 2 days after U.S. forces launched a strike on a Venezuelan drug boat in the Caribbean. President Trump said all 11 members of the Tren de Aragua gang on board were killed. The State Department declared the group a foreign terrorist organization in February. A Republican member of the Senate Armed Services Committee called the strike justified.
The boat had been warned to stop. They chose not to. They were clearly running drugs. We had been tracking it since it left Venezuela.
Many Democrats called the strike a violation of international law.
They think they can get away with this. God knows what they are going to do next. So that's what we're looking to right now, and there is reason to believe that this was not a legal action.
President Trump's defense secretary says the actions are justified after 400,000 Americans died from drug overdoses during the Biden administration.
A foreign terrorist organization poisoning your people with drugs coming from a drug cartel is no different than al-Qaeda.
At the height of the Obama administration, the U.S. military carried out drone strikes in 7 different countries: Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, Pakistan, Yemen, and Somalia. Over 500 in all, killing an estimated 3,500 people, including hundreds of civilians. President Trump also made it official, changing the name of the Department of Defense.
We're going Department of War.
This marks the second time in American history the Department of War nomenclature has been used to describe the cabinet overseeing the U.S. military. The first time was back in 1789. Of course, it needs congressional approval, the name change. Aisha?
And Lucas, tonight we're hearing about a new incoming report from Health and Human Services on autism. What do you know about that?
Well, Aisha, according to the Wall Street Journal, a new report from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and HHS this new report is going to be on autism and saying that a vitamin B9 deficiency and taking the pain reliever Tylenol during pregnancy could be linked to autism. And we just received this statement from HHS. It says, quote, "We are using gold standard science to get to the bottom of America's unprecedented rise in autism rates. Until we release the final report, any claims about its contents are nothing more than speculation." And it's not clear when this final report will be released. Aisha?
Okay, we'll wait for it. Lucas Tomlinson live at the White House. Lucas, thank you.
Every boatload of any form of drug that poisons the American people is an imminent threat. At the DOD, our job is to defeat imminent threats. A foreign terrorist organization poisoning your people with drugs coming from a drug cartel is no different than al-Qaeda. We smoked a drug boat, and there's 11 narco-terrorists at the bottom of the ocean, and when other people try to do that, they're going to meet the same fate.
Sending quite a message to Venezuela and the cartels. President Trump committing more assets to counter foreign cartels while Democrats are vilifying him, claiming he did not act within his legal authority when he authorized military force to decimate that alleged drug peddling speedboat, which was headed directly for the United States. Meanwhile, the Trump administration says those allegations are a farce and that Tuesday's strike was only the beginning for those looking to terrorize the United States of America. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany here with my co-host, Harris Faulkner. Also joining us, Nicole Parker. Not Nicole Parker. Oh, my goodness. That is Dr. Nicole Sapphire. We got that one wrong.
Nicole Parker. She's wonderful.
We love you both. Two great Nicoles. I'll take either one. And Rosanna Scotto, Fox 5, New York anchor and host of The Underground Economy on Fox Nation. And Guy Benson, Fox News contributor and host of The Guy Benson Show on Fox News Radio. Well, let's start here. Secretary of State Marco Rubio gave praise to President Trump for going on offense, saying the attack was life-saving and a legal use of his presidential authority.
This one was operating in international waters, headed towards the United States to flood our country with poison, and under President Trump, those days are over.
Well, Trump has spent months trying to undo what Biden failed to do for the last 4 years. Now, according to the NIH, there were over 400,000 overdose deaths under former President Biden. Think about that, 400,000 Americans gone. And Democrats won't give Trump the recognition because they're too busy pandering to the criminals, like Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen, who famously sat down for some drinks with MS-13 member Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Well, Van Hollen didn't stop there. Listen to this beauty from MSNBC.
Am I crazy? Am I wrong here that this seems to violate both U.S. and international law?
Chris, you're absolutely right. What this was an extrajudicial killing, pure and simple. It was illegal. I think the Trump administration just wanted to get a video of a boat blowing up because they did that at the same time they're cutting the federal budget when it comes to actual drug enforcement and serious drug trafficking.
Dr. Sapphire, so this was all about Trump wanting to get a video. Van Hollen uses the term, this is illegal on many counts. And we'll get to the law in a moment. I have that ready to go. Illegal on many counts. I want to bring up another count. It's one we just showed in the intro. It's the 400,000 Americans who have died of fentanyl. 400,000 daughters, sons, brothers, sisters not here because an attack, I'm going to call it an attack, on the United States, drug smuggling across our border and over our seas.
You know, the Wall Street Journal essentially did a hit piece on the Trump administration over this, and they quoted Juan Gonzalez, who was part of the Biden administration, saying that they needed to show legitimate self-defense for this attack and saying he did not do this. And just as you pointed out, 80,000 Americans died of drug overdoses last year. That's more than car accidents and homicides combined. That's more than the 23,000 worldwide deaths from terrorist attacks in 2023. So the way I see it, drugs coming into our country is the biggest national security threat we have. And yes, maybe we have a slight decrease in the drug overdose deaths, which people are celebrating. The reality is this is not a victory. This is just a temporary reprieve from the expanded use of naloxone. We have always played defense when it comes to drug overdose. We are plugging holes, we are fixing walls, we are getting drugs, and we are having to clean up all of these overdoses. But the time is now that we go on the offensive when it comes to drug cartels, and President Trump is doing just that.
You know, I want to get to the law, too, Guy. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the power to declare war. But there are a slew of Office of Legal Counsel opinions. That's not binding authority, but they cite binding authority going back to 1980 that illustrate the president's expansive power with foreign affairs. I want to pull up this memo from 1980. The president's inherent constitutional authority as commander-in-chief, his broad foreign policy power, and his duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed generally empower him to deploy the armed forces abroad without a declaration of war by Congress or other congressional authorization. It goes on, and there's much more nuance. This will have to be litigated by the Supreme Court. Nevertheless, he has broad authority to act.
As a commander-in-chief, as all presidents do, I'm not an expert on international law or his presidential authority in this narrow context. I would like to see that debate play out. I also wouldn't mind seeing Congress actually vote on this, because I would love to see who would vote no, who would look at this type of action from the United States and say, no, we actually want to protect these drug traffickers and cartel members. That's a vote that I would welcome, actually, on Capitol Hill. I think there's clearly a deterrence here. Because Senator Van Hollen, who has a completely screwed up moral compass, whether it's Kilmar Abrego Garcia, Israel, Hamas, he's really disgraced himself in recent years. So the fact that he's hardcore against this, I think, is almost an argument in favor of it. But, you know, he's going to make the case like, oh, this is just a photo op. Well, it's not a photo op to the drug smugglers who are now at the bottom of the ocean, number one. And number two, it's not just going to be consumed, that video, here at home. You think the cartels didn't pay attention to what they saw in that video? Might that change their conduct and their decision-making? I think that would be at least part of the calculus here that was completely dismissed in the clip that we watched.
I love the idea of the vote because, Harris, I could name a few that I'm just going to surmise might vote against this. Maybe all of the senators we watched on the Hill yesterday in the RFK hearing, maybe Sanders, maybe Warren, definitely Van Hollen. We could come up with a list.
Yeah, it becomes a midterm issue then, which is fascinating. Yeah. So a couple things. First of all, what you were talking about, Nicole, in terms of how much we have put into the survivability of these overdoses because there's so much of this illicit drug use on our streets. I think that's important to say. We have slowed things down at the border, but there's a tremendous amount of that product already here in the United States. We have many more lives to protect and save because of what happened under the Biden administration. And for even years before that, but precipitously bad under Biden. But then you've got to figure out, well, okay, why is the president sending 10 F-fighters to the Caribbean, to Puerto Rico, to base them there for a little while? Well, because these are cartels that are just going to do what they do. They're going to figure out a new avenue in.
They're already getting smarter. They already have new ways of coming in.
Absolutely. And that corridor up to that part of our United States, you heard Marco Rubio, our now Secretary of State, then Senator of Florida when he was dealing with it, right? I mean, they know that when they come up through the Caribbean, Florida's going to get hit. Come on. We've got to gear up for this. I love the way that the former AG of Florida, Ashley Moody, now Senator, put it last hour. She said, this president has new ideas. She begged Biden to come up with new ways. He wouldn't do it. Trump is doing it now.
Rosanna Hegseth, we heard him at the beginning of this segment use the word offense. And I think it's apropos that we're doing this story on a day where the Department of Defense is going to be relabeled the Department of War. To me, it just encompasses the entire foreign policy of President Trump. Offense, offense, offense. We will go on offense to protect Americans, whether it means bombing Fordo or protecting Americans from fentanyl by going after the cartels.
Kayleigh, I'm thinking, the war on drugs has been a topic for decades. Yeah. Administration after administration, millions, if not billions, has been spent on trying to get rid of drugs on our streets. And yet it doesn't seem like we've made a dent. Now, I don't know whether this is constitutional or not. I'm not in that field to weigh in on that. But I will say it says a very strong message. And if you're going to be one of those people who's going to be a mule and take drugs in, maybe you'll think twice about your life. Maybe it's not a done deal that you're going to make it to America. Hey, listen, in New York, we have places all around the city that are safe places to shoot up. And people in those neighborhoods, they know what it's like. They're dealing with the war on drugs right in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
Something has to be done. A message has to be sent. Maybe this is the message.
And in addition to what's going on with Pete Hegseth and President Trump, what they're saying, we also have to focus on Mexico because they're allowing the cartels to continue to grow, cut them off at the knees when it comes to their finances and also stop the supply of drugs coming across from China and other places. And I mean, this is a huge effort.
And I know there are a lot of legal experts naysaying this, but pulling back to the Harvard constitutional law days, there is vast power to act. There is a ton of 2001 opinion making that might, in fact, give the president some authority if, in fact, these cartels are legally classified as terrorist organizations. A big if. The Supreme Court, though, they'll have a voice in this.
Well, Senator Moody of Florida was saying that the designation already that the president has made has given him legal landscape, if you will, to move forward along with what you're citing.
Yep. These cartels are responsible for more American deaths than any other terrorist organization. So they need to be treated as a terrorist organization. And as Pete Hegseth said, we have to go on the offense if we care at all about American lives.
And the battlefield has changed when you have 400,000 Americans dying here at home by drugs shipped across.
All right, for more on this, let's bring in Mike Sorelli, retired Navy SEAL and host of Unsung Arlington on Fox Nation. Mike, let's dive into, we saw that video of taking out the Venezuelan drug boat. And our colleague here at Fox, Lucas Tomlinson, was deployed back in 2003 when he was in the Navy. And he did drug interdiction in the Caribbean aboard a frigate. And he said, back then there was a law enforcement component on the frigate. They would shoot to disable the boat, try and apprehend the drug runners, and then just confiscate the drugs. Now, it's an entirely different mission that certainly feels like simply shoot to kill.
Arguably, I could say this is long overdue. You look at the toll, and I don't know the exact number of the amount of Americans we've lost to drugs, whether it's fentanyl, cocaine, or any other major illicit drug. I think this response is long overdue. And, God bless our law enforcement brethren, but this is far outside their capability. And so this is where the Department of War comes into play. And it should be stiffer actions. It should be stiffer penalties for anyone trying to illicitly smuggle drugs into our nation that could potentially kill our youth and Americans. So I'm a strong proponent of the action that the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and President Trump are taking.
Mike, this is Jillian. Intelligence sources have been saying that if you're going to shoot to kill, a euphemism in this case, if you're going to take people out, 11 people, as happened the other day, you got to be 110% sure that those targets are culpable. Based on what you know from serving, do you feel comfortable that the government was 110% sure that all 11 of these people were the right targets?
I would love to meet the person who said you have to be 110% sure on anything. I'm going to tell you right now, the battlefield or situations like this, you never have the full picture. You, in fact, have to make very strong, decisive, quick decisions with 60 or 70% of the sight picture, or what we call intelligence. And that is the weight of the commanders that are making those decisions. That's the weight of the Secretary of War. That is the weight of the presidency. And you know, sometimes, guys, we get it wrong. That's war. And that's the war on drugs and the war on cartel. So you're never going to have, 110% or 100% assurance on these targets. But when it comes to American lives, that's our job, to make those hard decisions for which 99% of Americans don't want to make, trying to protect our youth, Americans, and our way of life.
Mike, I want to play for you a little bit of SecDef Hegseth. He was talking about this strike. And keep in mind, the Cartel del Soles, for which Nicolas Maduro has been indicted back in 2020 for being the leader of on narco terror and trafficking charges. Here's a little bit of Hegseth. Here's what he says.
But if you're trafficking drugs and you're a known cartel entity, a designated terror organization, and they're headed for the United States or part of a process that would head to the United States, that will have lethal consequences. The poisoning of the American people is over. Those foreign terrorists who were defeated in the Caribbean were just the beginning of what will happen if foreign terrorist organizations continue to try to poison the American people and kill them in our homeland.
And so, Mike, I want to get your reaction to that. It seems that this FTO or SDGT designations are really what's driving the authorization, if you will, to take these actions.
It is. I think putting the moniker of these are narco-terrorist organizations, and hence they fall under the rules of engagement for the military, is vitally important. And I think it's long overdue, guys. I remember the campaign back to the 80s of Don't Do Drugs. That was a very indirect way of curbing our addiction to drugs. But you've got to go to the source on this. And presidency after presidency has taken a soft approach, has proven ineffective. And guys, you're left with one resort. If we truly want to protect the American people, then you've got to go after the source. You got to go after the cartels. And that means, lethal action.
Mike, real quick before we let you go, what do you make of the president's decision to rename DOD the Department of War?
Well, I can tell you this. A lot of people are going to have an allergic reaction, and they don't understand the history. Jennifer said it earlier on her segment. It's been the War Department since 1789 to 1947. And when the decision, the national military establishment was made, it was to really invoke bureaucratic unification in a softer post-war image. At the end of the day, there's two messages here, guys. There's internally and externally. Internally, the War Department or Department of War is a cultural mind shift that these social experiments within DOD are done. At the end of the day, we have to be the most technologically, tactically, lethal force in the world. We are measured on our lethality as the military. And externally, it is very symbolic to our enemies of America is back, and we're serious about business. We are always in the pursuit of peace, but we are trained in the art of war. We are the best military force, so don't test us. People respond to strength. Weakness invites enemies at your doorstep.
No more nation building as well, it sounds like. Mike, got to leave it there. Thank you so much for taking time.
Republican Senator Ashley Moody of the great state of Florida, member of the Judiciary and Homeland Security Committees. She's also served as the state's Attorney General. Good to see you. Let's begin with that legal question about what the Trump administration is doing now to knock out narco-terrorism.
And thank you so much for bringing up this topic. You have always been paying attention to the number of Americans we were losing to these potent drugs. And just to put it in perspective, you gave the number during the Biden administration of 400,000 Americans that died just in that short period of time. And we know every year that was going up and up. It's skyrocketing. And why is that? It's because these drugs, the synthetic opioids, not just fentanyl, but the synthetic variations of that are becoming more and more potent. I remember as Attorney General, I was desperately asking the President, Biden, to think outside the box. We had to do something different. What was always being done was not working. We would have 7 people splayed out at a gas station that we had to rush in and try and save their lives, you know, here in Florida. I mean, it was happening over and over. And so I asked him, let's declare these cartels terrorist organizations. Let's take it a step further. This is so deadly. It's a weapon of mass destruction. We have to do more. Of course, that fell on deaf ears. So you have a president coming in and saying, business as usual isn't cutting it. We lost 400,000 under the Biden administration. You know how many Americans in the military we lost since 9/11? About 7,000. I mean, this is what the #1 killer of Americans. China knows it. The synthetic products are coming out of there. They know it because they're using it in negotiations with our country. Mexico knows it. And so President Trump's come in and said, no, we're going to declare these cartels foreign terrorist organizations, and we're going to take whatever means is necessary to protect American lives. He always thinks outside the box. What's always been business as usual doesn't work. We're going to try something new. And I think Americans should be proud of a president that puts American lives and safety first.
Wow, that information, too, that you gave us on Biden and how you were begging him, basically, to try to come up with something new, that is very jarring, considering how many Americans we lost on his watch. Let's go forward with this. The White House is rallying behind Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The fireworks were live right in this hour yesterday. I mean, the liberal senators teed off. There were some exploding conversations during that Senate hearing that unfolded, and Democrats went hard at the secretary, and he was giving as good as he got.
We are the sickest country in the world. That's why we have to fire people at CDC. They did not do their job.
Robert Kennedy has elevated conspiracy theorists, crackpots, and grifters to make life or death decisions about the health care of the American people.
25 years, while the chronic disease in our children went up to 76%. And you said nothing.
What you'd be doing is honoring your promise that you made when you were looking to get confirmed in this job.
I never promised that I was going to recommend products with which there is no indication.
When you said...
And I know you've taken $855,000 from pharmaceutical companies, Senator.
Did you catch that number? I mean, that was so jarring yesterday. He was given the facts on her. Vice President J.D. Vance, with strong words in the secretary's defense, posted this. When I see all these senators trying to lecture and gotcha Bobby Kennedy today, all I can think is you all support off-label, untested, and irreversible hormonal therapies for children, mutilating our kids and enriching big pharma. You're full of bleep, and everyone knows it. The president also standing behind Kennedy.
I didn't get to watch the hearings today. But he's a very good person. And he means very well, and he's got some little different ideas. If you look at what's going on in the world with health, and look at this country also with regard to health, I like the fact that he's different.
What that hearing was supposed to be was a laying out, if you will, of the president's agenda in terms of health care. In fact, that was the title of the hearing. It turned into almost like a wannabe impeachment from liberals toward RFK Jr.
Well, two things should not surprise us. Number one, the Democrats don't want there to be discussion or a review of different scientific viewpoints on what's happening to American health. Remember, this is the same party that during COVID was working with the social media companies to shut down any information that was being shared that wasn't what the government told you what was the truth and what was right. When I was Attorney General, we had to do a grand jury just to figure out if what was being put out there by the government during the Biden administration was true and whether there were misinformations and whether there was something put out that was in coordination, that, you know, how they were trying to shut out differing viewpoints. And so what also should not surprise anyone is that President Trump backed Kennedy because he is, and keep with the theme we were just talking about, it is insanity to keep doing the same things over and over, expecting a different outcome. He wants somebody that will question, look, you and I, when we were kids under 2, how many vaccines were they pushing how many were recommended? What was the government saying take? I think it's doubled, right? And so
well, I'm older than you are. It's definitely more than doubled in my lifetime. Yeah, definitely.
It just needs to be questioned.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean we don't have mandates. It's just mandates does not mean we don't provide for and make sure vaccines are available, but let's question and readdress. And I think that's what he's trying to accomplish.
Look, I would have to think in the Senate, you might even know this, Senator Tina Smith, but she made a false accusation against RFK Jr. And it wasn't just the first time. Well, Secretary Kennedy was ready. Watch.
You went on Fox News blaming school shootings on antidepressants. You have no evidence of that because you have no evidence of a connection. And you want to talk about...
You're just saying something. You're just making stuff up.
You know, this is what you say, right? Secretary Kennedy, when someone presents you with information that does not fit...
I did not blame that shooting. I have no idea whether... I have no idea, and I never said that. You're making it up. You're twisting. Yeah, you are.
So, you know, the senator actually needs to watch the tape for herself. Here it is on Fox and Friends right after that Minneapolis shooting. Here's what Kennedy actually said. Watch.
We're launching studies on the potential contribution of some of the SSRI drugs and some of the other psychiatric drugs that might be contributing to violence. You know, many of them on there had black box warnings that warn of suicidal ideation and homicidal ideation. So we can't exclude those as a culprit, and those are the kind of studies that we're doing.
Did Senator Tina Smith just maybe not watch it and somebody handed her a note and said, go after RFK Jr.?
And I think you're going to see them try to shut down the exchange of information about what is truly causing harm and deaths to Americans. And to have President Trump and Secretary Kennedy come in and say, as a government, let's promote exchange of information and dialogue on the issues that we are facing. The health crisis, the challenge that American is facing in terms of overdose and deaths. I mean, all of these things should not be shut down. We should encourage government to engage on the most challenging issues to this country and to Americans, and we should promote that, not try to shut it down at every turn.
Well, Senator Moody, we got to see a little bit of what you all are dealing with on the Hill as you lead up to a midterm year, and liberals seem to be just willing to make stuff up, some of them. It just is mind-boggling. Thank you very, very much for being in focus. Appreciate you.
I would say stand by tomorrow. It's something that words matter, titles matter, cultures matter, and you know, George Washington founded the War Department. And we'll see. Stand by.
So Secretary Pete Hegseth yesterday hinting at a renaming of the Defense Department, and later today, President Trump is expected to sign an executive order changing the Pentagon to its former namesake, the Department of War. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen is a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He joins us now. One of the questions today that I heard this morning was, would this require congressional action? What do you think?
No, I don't believe it does. Renaming it just shows a different mindset. The Department of Defense is meaning that you're defending. You're not being proactive, but you're being reactive. And the whole point of peace through strength is that you're trying to prevent wars. You can't prevent wars if you're always reacting to something. Sometimes you got to be proactive in that. I love the idea of getting back to the Department of War. We are in a very vulnerable time. I'd say it's one of the most vulnerable times we've had since prior to World War II. And this is changing the mindset that President Trump and Secretary Pete Hegseth has said. We are now focused on lethality and the warfighter. And I couldn't agree more with this. The Department of Defense, it should not only be reactive, and we've been reactive since World War II.
All right, and that is when the change was made. Let me ask you then about this, because one proactive action was shown this week in regards to the drug boat coming from Venezuela, and Secretary of Defense War, Pete Hegseth, he said this yesterday.
Mr. Secretary, what legal authority did the Pentagon invoke to strike that boat full of drug smugglers?
We have the absolute and complete authority to conduct that. First of all, just the defense of the American people alone. 100,000 Americans were killed each year under the previous administration because of an open border and open drug traffic flow. That is an assault on the American people. Every boatload of any form of drug that poisons the American people is an imminent threat. And at the DOD, our job is to defeat imminent threats.
And Ilhan Omar, but she's not the only one, is questioning the legality. She wrote this: I condemn the lawless and reckless actions in the Southern Caribbean. Congress has not declared war on Venezuela or Trinidad, and the mere designation of a group as a terrorist organization does not give any president carte blanche to ignore Congress's clear constitutional authority on matters of war and peace. So again, I ask you as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, what do you think about the authority here?
Well, we have the authority to do so, and Omar carries zero weight, and she's completely irrelevant when it comes to this. Anybody that wants to talk about national security should not be talking to Omar. She has zero credibility to this whatsoever. The fact of the matter is this was in international water. The boat had been warned to stop. They chose not to. They were clearly running drugs. We had been tracking it since it left Venezuela. And this is what you get. You know, you play stupid games, you have stupid results. And for Venezuela, the message to them is mess around and find out. We don't have Biden's administration in office. You have President Trump. We are being proactive, which goes back to changing from the Department of Defense to the Department of War. You continue to act this way. You continue to want to be a cartel rather than a legitimate country. We're going to continue to destroy all the assets. You want to fly a jet close to our assets? Mess around, find out what's going to happen next.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you about that. Can you explain to people what happened this morning in terms of what Venezuela did to us?
Yeah, so I believe, I haven't talked to anybody from Venezuela, but we believe that they tried to basically prove a point. We had a Navy ship in international water. They chose to fly a jet dangerously close to it, too close to the fact that they were also warned. They're lucky they didn't get shot down. It was 100% being provocative going towards us, and we think it was in a result to us shooting down one of their drug ships. And I do mean one of their drug ships. This ship that we destroyed was dispatched from Venezuela. And so this was a response, and we're going to respond back to what they did today.
All right, Senator, thank you. Glad you're back in Washington, even if you're not, but you said it is safer, so we'll keep in touch with you and maybe see you next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dana.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith, along with Kayleigh McEnany, Jessica Tarlov, Jesse Waters, and Greg Gutfeld. It is 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. America's warrior ethos is back. President Trump signing an executive order renaming the Department of Defense to its original title, the Department of War.
We won the First World War. We won the Second World War. We won everything before that and in between. And then we decided to go woke and we changed the name to Department of Defense. So we're going Department of War.
The War Department is going to fight decisively, not endless conflicts. It's going to fight to win, not to lose.
Really, it has to do with winning. We should have won every war. We could have won every war, but we really chose to be very politically correct or wokey.
And that warrior ethos was on full display in the Caribbean after U.S. forces obliterated a suspected drug smuggling vessel off the coast of Venezuela, a boat laden with deadly poison and headed straight for American shores. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth says this strike was not the end, it was the opening shot.
Every boatload of any form of drug that poisons the American people is an imminent threat. And at the DOD, our job is to defeat imminent threats. A foreign terrorist organization poisoning your people with drugs coming from a drug cartel is no different than Al-Qaeda. And they'll be treated as such as they were in international waters. We smoked a drug boat, and there's 11 narco-terrorists at the bottom of the ocean.
And yet the Democrats always have to reflexively oppose the president, even if it means siding with the narco-terrorists. Kilmar Abrego Garcia's biggest fan, Senator Chris Van Hollen, is back at it.
What this was an extrajudicial killing, pure and simple. It was illegal.
It's alarming, it's unprecedented, and it's dangerous. And it's the latest example of how Trump continues to overextend and abuse military power. He keeps pushing the boundaries to places we've never been before.
I guess it never surprised you where Democrats will go, what they'll defend or go after. But to the president's announcement a few moments ago, we all watched it live here on the Fox News channel. Now we're talking Department of War. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War. What do you think about all this, Jesse?
Well, I'm jealous of Pete. I mean, he got a name upgrade. I got to change my show's name. Jesse Waters Primetime just doesn't cut it.
Call it torture.
Isn't that what your show's called? So I don't know if Truman is a woke guy. From what I understand, after World War II, they needed a standing army to have troops stationed in Asia and in Europe to kind of keep the peace and maintain a posture during the Cold War. So we used to just have the draft every time we went to war. So even though we weren't at war, it was still a Cold War, and we needed to defend our interests. So we consolidated the Army, Navy, Marines, and there you go. It was the Defense Department. But it's now the Department of War, and I think America's enemies are upset. You know who's really upset? Van Hollen. So that just came out today, and I'm sure Jessica saw it. The Democrats are really trying to reconnect with normal people. That was what it says. They've lost touch with normal people. Let me just explain how normal people think. When you see a video of a cocaine canoe get smoked out of the water by the U.S. military, normal people say, yeah, all right? We're like, smoke some narcos, goodbye, light them up, see you later. That's what normal people do. Normal people like to see the war on drugs fought as a war because it hasn't worked the way before. And a lot of people in America, normal people, have families that have lost people to drugs. So they see this canoe and they see a potential death coming. And we like to light this guy up. The Democrats see this and they call it an extrajudicial killing. Normal people don't talk like that. Normal people don't talk like extrajudicial. You know who talks like that? Lawyers. They have to stop sounding like lawyers. You sound weak. You sound wily. Lawyers are unpopular, almost as unpopular as pollsters, Jessica. And when you contrast that with Trump, who's taking strong action, and you have a guy that's saying extrajudicial killing, it just makes you guys look pathetic and not normal.
Jessica, to Jesse's point, I mean, are Democrats falling for the latest trap, or aren't they just playing right into the hands of Republicans with Democrats now defending drug lords?
No, I don't see it that way. And I just want to, on the lawyer front, Jesse's always like, so embarrassing at the party of lawyers. If you guys had better lawyers, you would win more cases.
We've won everything
you
at the
lost
Supreme Court.
Literally every lawyer that showed up in court at the 2020 election
got
laughed. Oh, the big one.
That one.
The big lie. The
that
big one.
was not really
Okay.
well argued. We got better ones this time, and we're like 8-0. But go ahead, Jessica. I don't want to take your time.
Any hoodles. Yeah, Harry Truman, not famously woke. I should note a bunch of presidents that served our country, not Donald Trump, but Truman, Eisenhower, JFK, LBJ, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, H.W. Bush, all of them was just fine to call it the Department of Defense. You know who else calls it the Department of Defense? The people that Donald Trump are jealous of. The Chinese and the Russians also use that name. It's because he thinks it sounds more dangerous, more big guy, more manly. Like Jesse said, it's a nickname. It's all a game. And first of all, it passed through Congress. So they're probably going to have to go back through Congress to do it. So nothing has been changed except that their chyrons get to look that way. In terms of smoking the canoe with the drug lords on it, I don't know if it was extrajudicial. People have questions about how this happened, but our very own Jennifer Griffin was posting about the fact that now there are 8 Navy destroyers in the Caribbean, which certainly seems like we are going to war in that region. So typically the F-35s that are on there would be heading to Iran, for instance, to blow up a nuclear facility. What exactly are we doing? And then by extension of that, is there a chance that Donald Trump is trying to get us into a war with Venezuela so that he can use the Alien Enemies Act to try to pull off some of the deportations that he has failed to be able to do in the first few months of his administration?
That's a good conspiracy theory.
You like it?
I love it.
I give it to you.
I'll take it and run with it.
Okay.
Kayleigh, your former boss, does this anything surprise you about him not wanting to be on defense, right? He always says in his, his debates, his interviews, never ever put yourself on defense. You always want to be on offense. offense.
It's like you know him very well, because I remember being in a meeting with him when I was on the campaign, and we were determining the name for the counterpart to Act Blue. So it was, do we want Act Red or Win Red? And I said, President Trump, we're winners. We win. He goes, yeah, that's right. Winning's better than acting. Win Red doesn't surprise me. He wants to take off defense and put offense. Why? Because he's a president who's been on offense. This is more than just a name, Jessica. This is an entire cohesive foreign policy that has been offense. Bombing Fordo, taking out the drug cartel ship. Go back to the first term, taking out Soleimani, taking out al-Baghdadi, striking in Syria. When Biden said don't, President Trump said do. And what you are looking at is a reflection of that. They are taking down defense. They are going to make this the Department of War. This is a president of offense. He doesn't say don't, because when you say don't, the enemies act. When you say don't, Putin goes into Ukraine. When you say don't, Hamas attacks on October 7th. When you say do, when you actually do an action, you achieve the respect of the world, and that's what's happened with President Trump.
You were on maternity leave. Congratulations, by the way, during the Alaska summit, where he thought he made a lot of progress. I'm sure you did.
You don't check
and
out.
then Putin showed up, and he's standing with President Xi, and Donald Trump says now they're conspiring
How many
against
wars
me.
did Biden end? Also, when I was on maternity leave, we got to the fact that there are 7 wars that President
fresh,
Trump
even though you've
ended.
been on leave.
I am not fresh.
You are.
I'm very,
No,
and in fact, let me tell you
like
how
good fresh.
Let
like
me tell you how fresh
sparky.
I am not. I brought
Not
to
like
you.
rude.
You said you didn't know the legal justification for the striking of the ship. I brought it for you. OLC opinion from 1980, Article 2, Section 2, Commander-in-Chief power. So we've got that too. I'm fresh, and I brought my facts.
Wow, Jessica.
Boom.
What?
Greg, do you see any problem with this? By the way, that was fresh VO just a few moments ago.
I could smell it.
They're actively changing the names on those government buildings, as you can see, removing the defense.
I love the idea of changing names to represent the ideal, right? It's pure persuasion. This is why a lot of liberals like Jessica have to psychoanalyze him, because they don't understand persuasion. When you have somebody like Van Hollen who speaks like a lawyer, you're never going to persuade anybody. They should do this with all the departments. The ATF, which is alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, just call it the Department of Fun. The IRS, the Department of Extortion, the Department of Indian Affairs, casinos. TSA, just call it second base. But Trump is the most anti-war president I've ever had the pleasure of being alive for. And all of his strikes, as you know, are highly specific. And you can only do that with a really, really powerful war machine. We predicted that the taking out the narco-terrorists, in a matter of time, the media and the Dems would side with the narco-terrorists because Trump did it. And also because their problems, i.e. the bad guys, always seem to matter more than ours, Americans, whether it's fentanyl, gangs, sex trafficking. I'm sure one of those drug smugglers, we will find out through Van Hollen, owned a puppy and used to read to his grandma late at night. But we talk about the past. We don't have to go that far for this distinction. Trump was making a distinction about the last 4 years. What did Biden do to the Department of Defense? He turned it into a laboratory for social experimentation. It wasn't about protecting the country. We saw it. Everybody knew it. It was about making it an enlightened vehicle for the rainbow people. They treated the military like a Disney remake. Let's update all the characters, right? We'll add a gay here, put a trans here, a non-binary woodland elf. And then Trump enters the picture. He says, no. It's about war. And if it doesn't fit that definition, we don't want it. His critics don't understand this, and he drives them crazy because he operates on a superpower they don't have, which is persuasion. What is persuasion? Blunt language, usually that's pretty colorful and memorable. Department of War. He understands incentives and disincentives. Department of War is a disincentive. He also has you think past the sale. Calling it the Department of War then has you accept the premise in its own title. So when you hear things, you go, we need new missiles. Department of War. That sounds about right. We want a diversity month. Is that Department of War? No, it isn't. So he creates this world for you, and it drives the left crazy because they still haven't found the person who can do this. Jessica.
I can do it.
All right.
Up for president.
Up next, the showdown in Chicago. ICE agents are ready for a raid.
Kevin Donegan, former director of operations at U.S. Central Command. Admiral, great to have you on the show. I mean, I want to pick up where Jonathan left off there because it really is. I mean, this is a show of force. I want to put this map up, if I can, on the screen because here's the Navy assets that are in the Caribbean. We're talking about the ships in and about the Caribbean area here. And then you talk about having these 10 F-35 stealth fighters along with that. What do you think of that presence, of that message, Admiral?
Well, I think the message is clear that the administration wants to, the message they want to send is that, we don't want these drugs to come into the United States. For years, we've under-resourced the mission to stop the drugs that have been trafficked into the United States through air, land, and sea. And I don't know if this is the right mix to change that dynamic, but clearly we've under-resourced it in the past.
Yeah, I want to put this on the screen. This is the Wall Street Journal editorial board, and they say the following, quoting here, one geopolitical benefit of a U.S. policy to police the Caribbean more aggressively is that it's likely to disrupt, at least in the short run, the Maduro dictatorship's dollar income from trafficking, which it relies on to remain in power even more than oil. I mean, this is a major economic blow for Maduro, which means we should expect some pushback here, Admiral. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, first of all, if you look at the problem we're trying to solve, and I think it's different from the U.S. versus Venezuela. I think the problem we're trying to solve is that these drugs are being shipped into our country in this way, right? And we need to stop that. And the way we go about dismantling networks is you get at their funding, you get at their supply line, you get at their distribution, and in some cases you get at your leadership. But in this case, you also have to get at the demand stream in the United States. All those together is why we've had drug czars for decades, right, trying to tackle that very difficult problem. And none of those things individually, any of those lines of operation individually are going to solve the problem of drugs coming into the United States. But we have to do something about it. And the arguments currently are, should we continue to let this be led by organizations, Coast Guard organizations that are responsible for law enforcement, or should this be a Department of Defense mission? And, we could talk about that if you like.
Yeah, very good questions. Admiral Donegan, thank you for your time. Good analysis, sir. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay informed with the latest updates only on our channel. Don't forget to like, thumbs up, share, repeat button, and subscribe bell for more breaking news and analysis. See you in the next video.